Hi, and welcome to Matt Holman Talks Mental Health, the podcast where I have the opportunity to sit down and have conversations with amazing humans about their journeys with mental health. For this episode, I'm really excited to introduce Suzanne Alderson to the conversation. Welcome, Suzanne.
Thank you, Matt. Lovely to be here.
Oh, it's great to see you again. We've actually met in person, which is incredible because a lot of these recordings, I've never actually met the person that I'm talking to in the flesh, in person. So very quick introduction from me. How do I know Suzanne? Why are we talking today? And I'll let you do a proper introduction because I know you've got lots of things that you can share and tell people about. But Suzanne and I met recently at a conference called This Can Happen. We were actually on the same panel. We were talking about parenting through mental illness, and I'm not going to give anything away, but you might understand as well already listening what this might be about. But the reality was it was a great opportunity to sit down and to talk to other parents going through experiences or been through experiences, doing more to promote mental health conversations and support those who might be struggling in silence. So it's just been amazing. We had a nice walk back to the train station afterwards and just had a good chat, and it was just natural that there would be an opportunity for us to sit together and to record this episode. So it is great to actually sit down and do this. So thank you, Suzanne, and welcome. I'll let you do your introduction.
Thanks, Matt. And don't forget the hug. We did have a hug.
And the hug, yeah. This is when it was all legal to have hugs with people as well. We have to be careful with that, right?
Absolutely. It was definitely legal to have the hug, but it was great after sort of 20 odd months of no hugs. So yeah, it was lovely to do that. So thank you for having me on this podcast. Right. So I'm Suzanne. I'm the founder of Parenting Mental Health. So we're a charity and a community that supports parents of young people with mental health issues. I'm also the author of a book called Never Let Go: How to Parent Your Child Through Mental Illness. And all of this really stemmed from my experience as a parent when my daughter became depressed, anxious, underweight, and attempted suicide after being bullied. So lots of lived experience, but really a drive to support other parents through one of the most challenging and isolating times.
No, brilliant. And we're going to get into some of the depth of those conversations as well. And just to put out there at the beginning, of course, that, you know, we will be talking about some difficult subjects. So there is a trigger warning attached to this. You will see that anyway in the post for the session or for the recording. Yeah, please do take care of yourselves. If you need to take a step away from listening, please do make sure that you look after yourself through these conversations. So, Suzanne, I'm going to ask you a big question, which is the big question that I always ask in these recordings. Your journey with mental health. You define it as you like, you talk about what you want, and let's go into sort of a conversation, or, you know, you tell me a story first and then we'll talk about all those different elements.
Wow, where to begin? Yeah. Probably, I think it would probably be easy for me to begin with Izzy, my daughter, but I think actually my journey with mental health started a long time before that. Mm-hmm. So I had quite a traumatic childhood. I was, I faced quite a lot of emotional, physical abuse. Have an amazing mum, but I didn't have such a great dad. And that led to a lot of mental health issues for me, really around low self-worth, low self-esteem. And also, and this might sound a bit weird, but my parents are both quite small. And I'm nearly 6 foot, and I was always big. I know everyone says big boned, but I was always big. Right. And I think the point of my childhood was that the abuse, the situation meant I never felt emotionally safe, but I also physically felt that I didn't really belong. So I always felt out of sorts. I felt like I wasn't worthy. I was strange. I was odd, all those kind of things. And I think that really kind of carried on. And I think, you know, we don't talk. Well, we do talk, I suppose, about the role of fathers, but I think the role of fathers for girls is so important. And I know, Matt, you're such a great dad. But I think what you don't realize is the things that you don't see are the building blocks of self-esteem certainly in young women. And for me, I really struggled with that. I had an amazing stepfather who came in my mid-teens, but I think by then a lot of the damage was already done. Sexual violence at 15 and 17. So by the time I was 17, I actually had a breakdown, and I spent a year in bed, but not talking about it. My parents had divorced when I was 8. My father wasn't around. And I spent a lot of time just on my own trying to make sense of why there was something wrong with me. What was wrong with me? Why was I broken? And then when I was 18, I actually left home. I did my A-levels, but I didn't get enough to get into university. So I left home and I moved to Birmingham, which is a really strange choice. I love Birmingham. I'm back living in Birmingham now, but ended up back in London, ended up going back to my father and asking to stay. And he let me stay for one night and then he chucked me out. And I ended up sleeping rough for 6 months at 19. And I look at these experiences now and I think I, at the time, felt so weak and so disempowered. And yet I look and think, if that was me looking at a young person now, you know, there was huge strength and huge resolve, I think, in me to kind of to survive.
Yeah.
But gradually I ended up in a hostel. I ended up getting a job. I ended up finding a flat and started to stabilize myself. And then I met my husband when I was 21. And after 3 months of that, I fell pregnant. And my son is 27 now. He's wonderful. He really saved me. I'm going to get upset and emotional.
That's right. Don't worry
about him. Yeah, he really did. He saved me, and we were a team. And actually, I think for the first time in my life, I felt that there was something I could give, and I could, you know, I had a purpose as a parent, and I didn't know how to do it. I didn't have a clue, but all I knew was what I didn't want is my children to feel that lack of emotional safety, that lack of acceptance that I'd felt when I was growing up. And like I say, if my mum's listening to this, my mum's amazing.
Right.
But I think sometimes that there are circumstances, when trauma's involved, you know, you can't necessarily negate that trauma through love. You do definitely need psychological support to do that.
Sure. No, of course. And thank you for sharing that as well, and being open. And, you know, and I find it amazing that, you know, we met, but I didn't know this about you as well. And it's a new aspect or a new part of your story that I'm learning. For, you know, of course, anybody listening wouldn't necessarily know any of your story, which, you know, brings us to, you have children, you have this relationship, you have, you know, a way of parenting that you recognize a way of parenting that you didn't want to be, and you wanted to change some of that. So can we talk a little bit about sort of the next phase of this, which is around your daughter, of course? And I think, is that the next phase, or is there something else in between sort of your daughter?
I guess, I mean, my daughter was born 7 years after my son.
Yeah.
And my husband actually was chronically depressed when my daughter when she was born, and he ended up being hospitalized. So the early stages of her life were, and for me, if I look back at that time, I was really trying to find some, I used it, you know, 2 or 3 times now, that emotional safety and security I wanted to give my children. And I think that came through consistency. It came through nurture of them. And actually what I found was that as I nurtured them, I didn't necessarily nurture myself. So before we get to Izzy's part of the story, it's really important to say that I spent 46 years of my 50 years alive trying to work out what was wrong with me and trying to heal myself, trying to stop myself from feeling broken. And actually it was only when Izzy at 14 was being bullied and her mental health declined, and I'll talk about that in a moment, that I understood that it wasn't necessarily about me. Her psychiatrist gave me some great insight into my own experience as a young person, which suddenly kind of took the weight off me. It was like, oh, I'm not broken, I'm not wrong. And even though there'd been something, this core inside me that had compelled me on throughout my whole life, I still was always left with this sense of shame and not being enough. And that really was started to be, and I had loads of therapy, loads of therapy, but it wasn't quite right. And I think when Izzy got ill, what happened was I started to go on my own personal journey, and we can talk about that if we have time. But I think, you know, we look at therapeutic intervention and think it's the cure-all. Like, so if you said to me today, I'm feeling depressed, you know, lots of parents I speak to think, right, great, okay, we'll get you to the doctor, we'll get you medicated, we'll get you to a therapist, and then it'll be okay. And actually what I found was that you need the time, you need time to heal, but you also need time to get to a place where you feel safe enough that you can start to explore what's going on in your own mind.
Yes, so interesting, and you know, definitely a journey that I can recognize in terms of sort of our relationships and the things that have been going on in our world as well. And thank you for sharing about your husband as well, because it's, you know, it's another part of the story, isn't it, around that journey. And you know, when we talk about mental health as a journey, it doesn't just relate to us individually necessarily. It can be all those relationships that are around and alongside us too, right?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I think that's the point, isn't it? We tend to treat poor mental health in isolation,
Yep.
that it's something like a broken leg or, a cold that we can't treat a cold, but you know what I mean? It's something physical that we can actually, it's a process. Oh, we just tick these boxes and it'll be okay. But actually what we don't recognize is the impact on all of the areas of our life, and also the forward impact as well, like the lack of or the loss of belief, the loss of that certainty. I remember sitting, so I'll talk a little bit about Izzy because that's probably helpful. So Izzy was 14 and she was being badly bullied at school. And even though I was a really connected, really compassionate parent, thought, well, this is just one of those things. We'll just get through it. It'll be okay. She wouldn't let us speak to the school, and I understand why. But eventually my husband said, look, I'm going to have to go and talk to them. And he did. And the bullies were meant to be moved from her class. We had a summer break. We went back in September and they weren't. And her mental health basically declined within 3 weeks. She wasn't leaving the house. She wasn't eating. She wasn't sleeping. And we just didn't know what to do and how to deal with this, because ultimately the previous tactics or strategies we'd used were love it enough and it'll all be okay. And actually love wasn't enough here because, we couldn't manage this. So I ended up taking her to our GP. He referred her to CAMS, a 9 to 12 week waiting list, which we know now is like miraculous. But even then, 9 to 12 weeks just felt like the longest time. And I just didn't have any concept of how we'd get through it. I couldn't even conceive of getting through the next day. I just was so consumed by where this might go. But I hadn't ever considered what I was going to hear from the doctor. So he suggested we went back every week. And then the following week we did. And Izzy asked to go in on her own. And when they came out, the doctor said, please go home. I'm going to give you a call. And I remember standing in our hallway on the phone when he told me that she had a plan to end her life imminently. And just the whole world stopping, because this doesn't happen. You can listen to my story and say, well, it does happen to people like you because you've got trauma and there's abuse and you've had mental health issues and blah, blah, blah. But it didn't happen to people like us because we'd really tried as parents to negate all of the challenges of our own past experiences. But it does. And it happens to anybody and everybody. It doesn't matter where you come from, what your past is, what your future is, what your income is, where you live. It happens to all of us all the time. And I just, at that point, just thought, wow, gosh, I just couldn't. I was consumed by just absolute fear that we would lose her. And I know you understand that fear, Matt. It's something I don't necessarily know if I'll ever have the words to describe that feeling. It was the start of a whole different way of approaching our life, and a personal journey of personal growth in terms of healing myself. Had really intense therapy over the last 3 years, also of healing my relationships with the past, of building a completely new and wonderful connection with my daughter, which is just the biggest joy in my life. Fortunately, she's still here. She's at university. She's 20. She's doing great. We have ups and downs like everybody does. So we can't go, oh, it's great, it's fine. We have ups and downs, it's life. We're human. But it was through adversity, we have benefited so much from that adversity. And it's very hard to say that to somebody and for them to believe it when they're in the depths of crisis. But it's been an unfurling of us as people, and it's been just wonderful and the most challenging thing I've ever done in my life.
Wow, and you've done an amazing job and got through that journey, and the journey continues. Of course it does. We can't just rest on it and think, oh, nothing will ever go wrong again. And I think that's the lesson we learn. And you touched on some points there, and I could feel my emotions starting to come through a little bit with some of those thoughts as well, because we've been in very similar situations, with our own daughter, and that's what brought us together actually, is our children, really, isn't it? It's the journey we've been on as parents, and some of those thoughts, that feeling. And I was trying to connect to my feeling, of how I felt when that was going on in our world, where, our daughter didn't want to be alive. And actually I sort of use this thought of like purgatory. It's almost like you've got somebody that's alive, but they're not alive. You've got somebody who's in between life and death. And and they don't want to be here, and it's that harsh reality, isn't it? And I don't know about you, Suzanne, I'm going to share something here which maybe people will find difficult to hear, but sometimes we wondered whether it was the best thing for her not to be here.
Yeah.
Because what's the life like when somebody doesn't want to be alive?
No,
you know
I completely, and thank you for sharing that, because I know lots of parents feel that way, and lots of parents struggle with feeling that way, when actually, because you love somebody so much, you want the best for them. And we can't conceive of the best being at the ending of a life, can we? We can't kind of get our heads around that. But I think it's a very brave thing that you've shared there. And I know that many parents in the parenting mental health community share your feelings there, definitely.
Well, my wife and I, we had that conversation. We really did. And it was it's the hard conversation, isn't it? You're talking about almost switching off the support for somebody, and no, of course that was never going to happen. We were never going to let that happen, but it is one of those thoughts in your head of how the hell can we take somebody from being in so much pain to stop the pain? And I'm not saying that means we would do anything to assist that. We would just always think, but it's a conversation, isn't it? And it's that hard reality, and actually what you've shared and the way that you share it enables me to be able to talk about it. And I thank you for that as well, because it's safe, isn't it, for us to have this conversation.
It's really safe, Matt, and I think we need to have more conversations like this. I had a situation just this summer where I mentioned I was having intense therapy, and I felt like it was like having open heart surgery without any anaesthetic, and it consumed me. It consumed every waking moment, and I sat actually at this desk one day after a Zoom session thinking, I understand now why Izzy wanted to end her life. Because the pain of living, I wasn't suicidal, I wasn't going to act on it, but I understood in that moment why she had felt that was her only option, because the pain of living was so great. So when you share that you and your wife have had that conversation, I think it's a very real one. It's a compassionate conversation to have.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's a real interesting dynamic when you start to think about sort of people at the end of their lives. We're talking about our children, we're talking about young adults or young people who they have a long life ahead of them, and my daughter definitely does, and your daughter does, of course, as well. It's a long, happy, fruitful, fulfilling life ahead of them, and we're thinking of it like they're at the end of their life, and it's that harsh thought, isn't it, of wow, this is too young and this is too much. And just taking it out into the wider community in the world, suicide statistics for young people are going up, and it's a harsh reality, isn't it, of this is difficult moments. And for young people there are parents, for young people there are grandparents, for young people there are many people attached to those communities. And I've been very lucky to have conversations with so many different people around these conversations of suicide in particular, but it's a difficult one. The compassion we show to somebody at the end of their life when they're struggling with chronic pain or debilitating limiting illnesses is, please, let's put them out of their misery, let's give them a dignity in death. And it's hard, isn't it? I don't know if that even means anything what I've just said, but that's sort of just something that I was thinking as we were talking about that.
Definitely. I think these are very challenging conversations. And I think the point is that when you're dealing with a young person whose brain is growing, let's be honest, they're living a life that we haven't lived. You weren't texted by somebody in your bedroom when you were 13 or 14.
Not at all.
They're dealing with an uncertain future. They've got so many inputs that are so challenging to them. And us as parents, we don't have the same sense of community, I don't think, as our parents or our grandparents did. We don't have the extended families generally to rely upon for wisdom. So we're dealing with a really challenging new way of parenting without kind of a lot of tools, which is really, really hard. So sorry, carry on.
No, not at all. And you're right, it is about the tools, isn't it, and having the right tools and the right, we're very quick, we think the tools are relating to a piece of technology. So how do we help children to relax when they're bored, or do things when they're bored? Give them a piece of technology, watch a program, or and actually we've forgotten the art of just disconnecting from some of that and doing normal before we recorded this, we were laughing and we were joking about stupid things, silly things, right, that people, if they heard our conversation, would probably want to exactly, they want to join in, right? So they wouldn't be judging us, they'd want to join in with the conversations, the creativity that we were coming out with. But it's so important to manage that into your day and your routines as well, though. So it didn't when your daughter was struggling, and I just want to ask this question as frankly as I can, and did you still have the ability to continue your life? Did you feel that that was possible?
I had about 8 months where I couldn't. I was consumed by it. So I would wake up and my first thought would be, is she alive? Which is a very real one and a heavy weight to bear every day.
Yeah, of course.
And it would be a case of what can I do today? And this is in like the initial stages. It was like, what can I do today to make a difference? How can I fix this? What can I do that's going to make a difference to her? And actually, and how can I release the pressure? And I used to go to, there's some fields around our house, and I literally would scream at the top of my voice because I had this, it wasn't a rage, it was a sort of a quiet urgency and a compulsion to effect change. And I couldn't effect any change. I couldn't fix it. And that's what I wanted to do. And actually what happened over time was I recognized, and it was actually not, it was actually going with the professionals' advice, with no disrespect to the professionals. We had an amazing CAMS team, but actually some of the things that they suggested, you know, bearing in mind she'd been bullied, you know, they were hell-bent on getting her back into school. And all of the times whenever we listened to them, we pushed her further away. So actually I started to get quiet. So the walks over time would stop being kind of yell fests, start being time of contemplation, time of processing, and actually listening to her. So I started to listen to my own intuition, and then I started to listen to her. And I think what we tend to do with young people, we can do, is to negate their experience and make it seem like, well, what do they know? What have they got to be worried about? And actually they've got a hell of a lot to be worried about, and they've got a hell of a lot to deal with. And as soon as I started to say to Izzy, you know, I don't know what you're going through, but I'm here to listen and I'm here to understand. So I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to be led by you. And that's where the partnering, not parenting kind of approach came in, which is I'm going to step down from the position of authority to say that I know what's best for you. I'm going to step down from my own emotions because they're not helping you. And I'm going to stand beside you in your experience, not tell you what it is, not tell you what you should do, and not lay on my own expectations and obligations on you. And we're going to travel together, and it's going to take some time. And I think just going back to that previous point, as parents, we are, you know, we want to push stuff through, you know, right, okay, if I could just get them to that stage, oh, it'll be okay. Oh, we'll just get to that stage. We can get them to being you know, a functioning adult. It'll all be okay. And we can lose so much of that connection and understanding and trust by doing that. So for me, it was a really challenging time, but it was a transformative time in terms of understanding myself, understanding my daughter, and understanding how we could create this relationship.
Wow, it's incredible. And you made a statement in there which was so simplistic, and it was that piece around sort of the conversation changes when you start listening to them, when you engage in that, you know. And I found that with my daughter, you know, I was hell-bent on trying to fix everything, like we would as parents. We think that we can fix the problems of our children. Now, if it's a physical problem, or if it's a, you know, the computer's broken or the Wi-Fi's down, you know, we tend to know sort of how to reboot and how to do those. With these issues and these challenges, it's really hard because we don't know what's going on. And I say to my daughter, you know, she had an eating disorder and she had bullying and things, and it was like, right, I can help you, I know how to do this, I work in this area. And she'd say, Dad, you're not listening and you don't understand, you know. And I'd say, no, I do understand, because, you know, I'm connected to all these people, I know people with eating disorders, so I can get you to talk to them, it'd be really great, I can take you to therapists. Everything was about me trying to fix it and solution everything. And why was I doing it? Because I love her and I wanted to do the right thing, but I didn't do the right thing. And then that would push her further away. She'd get more argumentative, more upset, more angry. The day that it changed was the day that I turned around to her and I said, you know, I don't understand what you're going through. And then we started to talk, and then we communicated, and then and my relationship with my daughter is amazing now as well. And I think that's born through that crisis point of, I need to listen to this, I can't keep trying to fix. And it's, you know, or like, you know, and stepping aside and just having the ability to walk with her down that pathway of, you know, life's going to be long, life's going to be a journey, I'm not going anywhere, you know, I'm always going to be with you on your side. And the thing that I give her, which is the most incredible thing, and you mentioned it at the beginning actually, is the hug. She needs a hug. She's like, Dad, I need a hug, can you give me a hug? And I'm like, you know what, I've got lots of those. So if that's all she needs me for at the moment, that's what she needs me for. So it's incredible.
A hug is a physical manifestation of acceptance, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It just says, I'm here. And that
connects you.
The whole oxytocin thing, like releasing and all the rest. But for me, it was the purest way of saying, I'm here.
Yeah.
I accept you. I accept this. I might not like it. I might not want it, but I accept it. And
hug is never used to punish someone, is it?
Never.
Even if their voice in their head says you're not worthy, you should be punished. A hug is an acceptance of, something with kindness attached to it. So everybody out there should be hugging more.
Exactly.
There you go. That's the tip of the day.
Hugs this 2022, Matt. Let's start it.
When COVID restrictions were, I was out hugging trees even, I was like, I need to put my arms around something. So I was, there's actually pictures of me hugging trees, which is
very good for you, actually.
It was really
very grounding. Yeah.
It was quite interesting as others were walking past, just watching me hugging this big tree in the Winter Gardens in Bournemouth. It was quite interesting. Anyway, moving on the conversation, because I do want to cover a few more pieces, and we're going to blow the time on this one, I think, because I think it's important that we cover off what you're doing now. Parenting mental health was something that was born through experience, through a passion, through how did this happen? How did you get to a point where you went, you know what, I need to do something here? What was your driving force?
I sat in Izzy's room on suicide watch, and it was 3 a.m, which feels like the loneliest time in the world, because you feel like you're the only person that's awake. And I can remember sitting in my son's room at 3 a.m, or actually downstairs in the living room, and yelling upstairs to my husband, you've got to come and get this baby off of me, because it was just, I was consumed by it. That was like 20 odd years before. And I just sat there and thought, I can't be the only parent. There'll be parents like I was in 1994 with newborns. I can't be the only parent in 2015 with a teenager who is doing the same thing, who's having to have that same sense of close contact. And then I sat there and I thought, well, if I'm not the only one, then something in me just compelled me to make a decision. And the decision was, I want no other parent to feel like I did, isolated, judged, and ashamed. I felt very ashamed, or ill-equipped. So it's so important that we can give parents a support space where they can get peer support, but we can also train them. We give them the skills that they need, because parenting a child with a mental health issue is completely different to parenting a child. It is completely different. You need a different skill set and a different approach. And so probably I kind of kept saying this, and I said to my husband, I'm going to raise money for CAMS, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And then about 9 months later, I just set up a Facebook group and thought, what I really want to do is bring these people together and to kind of start to break down the isolation. And so I think we had about 300 people for about a year. And then gradually it started to grow and grow and grow. And then in 2018, Facebook recognized me as one of their 100 most meaningful community leaders, which I'm only sharing because that was really the start of the community growing, and Facebook definitely supported it. So now we support just under 24,000 parents in our peer support community, and we offer training events, listening circles starting in January, just ways for people to come and share their experience, because again, we can't fix the parent's experience in the way that the parent can't fix the child's experience. So it's so important that we have these spaces that, a bit like today, we can just come and have a chat, and you're not trying to fix me and I'm not trying to fix you. It's just, we're having a conversation, and that's just really, really important.
So true as well, and well done for, and it's getting recognized now as well, isn't it, the work that you're doing, and through the charity, and getting so recognized out there, and it is a big important area, and I think there is a very there's not a lot of discussion around it in the past. And it's that connection of, we often just focus on the one thing, which is the person struggling, and we forget about the other thing, which is the community, the family, the siblings, the people around that. And I think it's such an important part of mental health now, isn't it?
It really is. And I think it's not just about supporting those that are caring, like you say, the siblings, the parents, but it's also recognizing the really important role. You've talked there about the way that you changed your communication style, and probably managed your own expectations, stop judging yourself, maybe judging your daughter's actions, not your daughter herself, but just her actions. When you can start to unpick that, then you can be a really powerful advocate and an agent of change in your family. And that's why Parenting Mental Health, as you say, we are a UK registered charity. believes in the power of the parent to effect change in their young person's life. If we can get to them early enough, we can help parents to have more connective relationships with their children.
Yep.
But we do tend to work with parents in crisis, because by the time you get to this stage, you've gone through, you've been to the doctor, you've tried the medication, you've been through, tried to get your child into therapy, or not, you've not been able to access it. And actually you're depleted, you're desperate, you're exhausted, and you need support. You need somebody to say, there's always hope, and there's always an opportunity for change, and here's how you can do it. And to feel empowered, I think parents feeling empowered about something that nobody wants to happen to them is just one of the joys of my life. Whenever I get a message from somebody to say, I was actually 50 this week, and I got, I know.
Happy birthday. I didn't know this.
How did that happen?
It wasn't well publicised. Happy birthday.
I'm a proper adult now. Possibly.
Half centurion, isn't it? Isn't that what they say?
Yeah, all right, Matt. Don't go
Oh,
on
sorry.
I'm only kidding.
I'll put myself back in that box now. Sorry about that. Yeah.
But I got birthday cards from people I didn't even know who said that parenting mental health has literally changed their lives. It's kept their families, their children alive, kept their marriages together, and that's the power of community.
Of course.
And it's a wonderful thing when you can bring people with that shared experience together.
Amazing. And that is, it's so true, isn't it? And I love that thought of community, and it is the power of the community, because often we just feel isolated and alone and unable to sort of reach out and feel there is nowhere to reach out to, or who will listen, who will have that conversation with me. But it's the power of the community. I love that. We are just running over a little bit, so just final sort of pieces really, but also about, you're an author of a book as well, so that's another sort of little hat that you wear, being an author of a book. Never let go. When did you decide that you would write a book?
I think it was probably one of the other nights after I'd sat there and decided that I was going to I was going to change the world.
Creative times in your evenings, obviously.
It was 3 a.m. It's clearly a very creative time for me.
Okay.
But I recognised that what I wanted. So what I do, if you ever come to my house, Matt, you'll notice that it's full of books. If I have a problem, I go and buy a book.
Okay.
That's what I do. And what I needed was a book that would help me to not feel judged, to make sense of what was going on, be really pragmatic, but incredibly compassionate. So a real companion to my experience as a parent of a young person with a mental health issue. And so I decided that I would write a book. I've always wanted to write a book. I always thought it'd be a mystery thriller, but it's not. It's a non-fiction book about mental health.
Yeah.
And so I started writing it, probably about 2017, I started writing it.
Right.
And then a friend of mine said, this deserves to be out there. You need to go and find somebody to help you get it out into the world.
Yeah.
And I got an agent who then got me a deal with Penguin. And so Vermilion, one of the Penguin imprints, published it in 2020. And it's been well received, well reviewed. But more than that, it is what I wanted. People have bought the audio book to listen to. People say to me, you make me go to sleep at night. Your voice is so calming. I'm like, that's great. Okay, wonderful. And they say, I'm writing in the book, I'm making notes. And that's really what I wanted. Something that was a companion of the journey, along with the community, obviously, as well.
Amazing. So lots of incredible things that you've set up, and through your journey and through your experience and your learning and your continual sort of evolution of where you're going with all of these things as well. Keep going, please, because parents need you, and you're obviously seeing the rewards of that in the sense of people coming to you and saying thank you. That's what I think we do this more for the thanks and the sort of people knowing that we're touching or we're helping people, right? And I don't mean we're looking for lots of thanks and likes. That's not the social media element that I'm looking at. It's more about knowing that you're helping somebody is always a really valuable piece, and it's the reward that we crave, isn't it? It's sort of, I want to put something out there that helps somebody, and if I help somebody, then I'm doing a good job. So
I think a lot of people will run away from adversity, and you and I have run towards it. And I think it's hard, it's challenging. There are days where I cry because of the stories I read, but ultimately it's so rewarding to be connected to other parents with the same experience and to give them some help.
Totally. These are the pages of the handbook that we never receive when you're doing NCT classes and all those, how to change a dirty nappy and how to feed a child and how to, these aren't the conversations we have, are they? Or the lessons that we learn. And, my frustration is more about, we don't learn about mental health until we're adults. We need to learn about mental health when we're younger, so that we understand when things start to change, how we can adapt and get the right help and support. So that's a whole nother conversation. We're not going to go into any of that around what's available and what's not. But Suzanne, thank you so much. I really do genuinely appreciate it. I, hand on heart, love everything you're doing and everything you're about, and for you and your family to continue to thrive. That's what this life is all about. It's there to thrive, isn't it? Any final thoughts? I'm just going to throw that to you, just to say, if you've got any final thoughts you want to share with anybody, any words of wisdom.
I suppose as a parent, be patient. Things always will change. Don't judge yourself because you didn't cause this and you can't fix it. And come and join us in Parenting Mental Health. If you are struggling with your child's mental health, we will be a safe, compassionate space for you to connect with other parents who are going through it, because you are not alone. As Matt and I know, amazingly, we met and connected, but we are two of many, aren't we, who are struggling with this. So don't be ashamed of it. Don't blame yourself. Come and connect with people that get it, and we will support you through.
Absolutely. I totally echo that, and ditto and everything else. And for anybody that is listening, if you are struggling, if you are needing to reach out, there are these resources that Suzanne very kindly has, set up. So the Facebook group, I'll post all the details anyway, so people can access those. And of course, these are accessible. We're accessible people. So if you do have a question, you want to ask something, please do feel free to get in touch and make contact, because, as Suzanne says, you're not alone. If you feel worried about your child, if you're worried about yourself, if there's anything you need to talk about in confidence outside of these conversations, of course, Samaritans exist today to help us as parents, of course, and for young people. There are young children's organizations, charities out there as well that help young people who are struggling. Papyrus is really useful. Young Minds is a useful resource. There are many of them, but no, there are organizations, please know that are there to support and to help. And there's also the Shelt Text service, which, because of the way that young people don't necessarily want to pick up a phone, maybe you can encourage them to text to Shelt 85258. So lots of different resources out there, but you know what? We can all get through this if we talk to each other and we listen to each other as well. So thank you so much, Suzanne. It's been an absolute pleasure. I knew it would be anyway, because you're an amazing human. So what can I say? It's been great. Thanks so much. I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you.